In 1545, Spanish explorers discovered a mountain in what is now Bolivia. Not just any mountain, a mountain made of silver, literally. The Cerro Rico, or Rich Mountain of Potosi. For the next century, this single mountain would produce nearly half of the world's silver. Ships loaded with silver crossed the Atlantic, filling Spanish coffers with wealth beyond imagination. At its peak, Potosi was one of the richest and most populous cities on Earth, larger than London or Paris. Spain controlled more precious metals than any nation in history. They had a literal mountain of silver, infinite wealth. The Spanish Empire stretched across every continent. The sun never set on Spanish holdings. And yet, by 1700, Spain was economically destroyed, bankrupt, declined into irrelevance, one of history's greatest empires, brought down not by military defeat, but by the very wealth that should have made them invincible. This is the paradox that has destroyed nations throughout history. More money doesn't make you richer if everyone has more money. Spain proved that you can have infinite resources and still destroy yourself through inflation and economic mismanagement. And right now, every oil-rich nation is repeating Spain's exact mistake. To understand how Spain destroyed itself with silver, you need to understand what they discovered. In 1492, Christopher Columbus opened the New World to European conquest. By the 1500s, Spain had conquered the Aztec Empire under Hernán Cortés and the Inca Empire under Francisco Pizarro. These civilizations had enormous amounts of gold and silver, but the real prize came in 1545 when Spanish prospectors discovered Cerro Rico in Potosi, in what is now Bolivia. This wasn't just a silver mine, it was the largest silver deposit ever discovered in human history. The mountain was almost pure silver ore. For the next 150 years, Potosi would produce an estimated 45,000 tons of pure silver, nearly half of the world's total silver production. To put that in perspective, Spain went from having modest silver reserves to controlling the majority of global silver supply overnight. It was like discovering a money-printing press that never runs out of ink. The city of Potosi exploded. By 1650, it had a population of 200,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the world, larger than London, Paris, or Rome. The wealth was incomprehensible. Spanish galleons, the famous Silver Fleet, crossed the Atlantic loaded with silver bars and coins. The famous pieces of 8 Spanish dollars made from Potosi silver became the first truly global currency. They were used from Europe to Asia to the Americas. Spain minted this silver into coins. The Spanish dollar became universally accepted. Spain had become the richest empire on earth. At its peak in the late 1500s, the Spanish Empire controlled territories on every inhabited continent, the Philippines, the Americas, parts of Europe, trading posts in Africa, and all of it funded by that mountain of silver in Potosi. But here's where the paradox begins. Having infinite silver should have made Spain the richest nation forever. Instead, it destroyed them. The problem? Spain stopped producing anything else. When you have a mountain of silver, why bother with manufacturing? Why develop industries? Why innovate? You can just buy everything you need from other countries with your silver. This is what economists call Dutch disease, named after what happened to the Netherlands when they discovered North Sea oil. When one resource dominates an economy, it kills every other industry. Spain's economy became a one-product system. Extract silver from Potosi, ship it to Spain, use it to buy goods from France, England, and the Netherlands. Spanish agriculture declined. Why farm when you can import food with silver? Spanish manufacturing died. Why make textiles when you can buy them from the Dutch with silver? Spanish innovation stopped. Why invest in new technologies when you're already rich? The wealth was flowing in, but Spain wasn't building anything productive with it. They were spending it, not investing it. Palaces, wars, luxury goods, all purchased with silver that flowed right back out to other countries. France, England, and the Netherlands were happy to sell goods to Spain. They took Spanish silver and built industries, developed technologies, created wealth. Spain took silver and bought consumption. This is critical. The silver flowed in from Potosi and flowed right back out to pay for imports. Spain became a pass-through, Silver came from the Americas, passed through Spain, and ended up in the treasuries of France, England, and the Netherlands. But the real destruction came from inflation. Because here's the paradox: more money doesn't make you richer if everyone has more money. When Spain flooded Europe with silver from Potosi, what happened? Prices rose. What cost one silver coin in 1500 cost 10 coins by 1600. That's inflation. The silver hadn't become less pure, there was just vastly more of it. When supply increases dramatically, value decreases. This is basic economics, but Spain's kings didn't understand it or didn't care. From Spain's perspective, they had infinite wealth. But from Europe's perspective, Spanish silver was becoming less valuable every year because there was so much of it. This is the first lesson. Resource abundance without productive capacity equals inflation, not wealth. Spain's kings were spending like they had infinite wealth, because from their perspective, they did. A mountain of silver that kept producing year after year. King Philip II, who ruled from 1556 to 1598, is the perfect example. He inherited the Spanish Empire at its absolute peak. The silver from Potosi was flooding in. Spain controlled vast territories. The military was powerful. Philip used this wealth to fight wars on multiple fronts. Against the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean, against Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, against England, sending the famous Spanish Armada in 1588. He built palaces, he funded the Catholic Counter-Reformation, he maintained a massive bureaucracy to administer the empire, he lived in spectacular luxury. But here's the problem. Even with a mountain of silver, Philip spent more than the silver could cover. How is that possible? Because wars are expensive, maintaining global empire is expensive, and Spain wasn't just funding current expenses, they were borrowing against future silver production. Philip II borrowed money from European bankers, primarily from German and Italian banking houses. The loans were secured by future shipments of silver from Potosi. The thinking was, we have infinite silver coming, so we can borrow infinite amounts now. But the silver fleet didn't always arrive. Ships were lost to storms, pirates attacked convoys. The English, under Queen Elizabeth I, actively targeted Spanish treasure ships, and production at Potosi was less reliable than projected. When silver shipments were delayed or captured, Philip couldn't repay his loans. Interest accumulated, new loans were taken to pay old loans. The debt spiraled, and crucially, the bankers charged interest. Even if Spain produced infinite silver, the debt was growing faster because of compound interest. You can't borrow your way to prosperity when interest exceeds income. In 1557, King Philip II did something unprecedented. He declared bankruptcy. Spain, the richest empire on earth, controlling half the world's silver production, couldn't pay its debts. This was the first sovereign default in modern European history. Philip suspended all debt payments. Creditors were shocked. How could the nation with a literal mountain of silver be bankrupt? But it wasn't the last time. Spain defaulted again in 1560, 3 years after the first default, again in 1575, again in 1596. 4 defaults in 40 years. Despite controlling half the world's silver, Spain defaulted on its debts 4 times. Let me repeat that. Spain had access to more precious metals than any nation in history. They were pulling silver out of the ground by the ton. And they went bankrupt 4 times. Each default destroyed trust. After the 1557 default, interest rates on Spanish debt skyrocketed. Bankers knew Spain might not pay, so they charged much higher rates. This made the debt even more expensive, which made future defaults more likely. It's a death spiral: default, higher interest rates, more expensive debt, can't repay, default again. By the 1600s, Spain's credit was ruined. European bankers wouldn't lend to Spain except at ruinous rates. The government was forced to debase the currency, mixing copper with silver coins to stretch the metal further. This caused domestic inflation and destroyed trust in Spanish currency. The government also imposed heavy taxes on Spanish subjects, but taxes couldn't keep up with spending. The bureaucracy consumed revenue, the military consumed revenue, the debt service consumed revenue, and the silver from Potosi, it kept flowing directly to foreign creditors and foreign merchants. Spain saw the silver but couldn't keep it. By 1700, when the Spanish Habsburg dynasty ended, Spain had fallen from the richest empire on earth to a second-rate power. The empire was fragmented, the economy was shattered, the population had declined due to economic hardship and emigration. The Bourbon dynasty that took over tried reforms, but the damage was permanent. Spain would never regain its position as a dominant global power. And the mountain of silver at Potosi? It kept producing for centuries, but the wealth went to other nations, to the merchants who traded with Spain, to the creditors who lent to Spain, to the nations that built real economies while Spain just spent silver. Spain's collapse teaches several critical lessons that apply to every resource-rich nation since. Lesson 1. Resource wealth without productive capacity equals poverty, not prosperity. Spain had infinite silver but produced nothing else. When you don't build industries, develop skills, or create value, you're just converting resources into consumption. The wealth flows through you, not to you. Lesson 2. Inflation destroys wealth regardless of how much money you have. When Spain flooded Europe with silver, prices rose proportionally. Having 10 times as much silver didn't make Spain 10 times richer. It just meant everything cost 10 times as much. Nominal wealth increased, but real wealth didn't. Lesson 3. You cannot borrow against future resource production indefinitely. Spain borrowed thinking silver shipments would always arrive. But production varied, ships sank, and pirates attacked. When actual silver fell short of projected silver, the debt became unpayable. Lesson 4. Defaults destroy trust and make future borrowing more expensive. After Spain's first default, creditors demanded higher interest rates. This made the debt more expensive, which made future defaults more likely. It's a reinforcing cycle. Lesson 5. Dutch disease is real. Resource dominance kills other industries. When one sector dominates, the currency strengthens and other industries become uncompetitive. Spain's silver wealth made Spanish manufacturing impossible to sustain. The economy became completely dependent on one resource. Lesson 6. Money is not wealth, productivity is wealth. Spain had more money than anyone. But they weren't productive, they weren't innovative, they didn't build lasting value. When the silver ran low, there was nothing left. The nations that took Spain's silver and built industries, France, England, the Netherlands, became the new powers. These lessons aren't just historical. They're playing out right now. Spain's silver paradox has repeated throughout modern history. Every resource-rich nation that fails to diversify follows the same pattern. Venezuela is the perfect modern example. Largest oil reserves in the world, more oil than Saudi Arabia. In the 1970s, Venezuela was Latin America's richest nation. Then they stopped producing anything except oil. Manufacturing died, agriculture collapsed. The entire economy depended on oil revenue. When oil prices crashed in 2014, the Venezuelan government, which had been spending oil revenue on social programs and imports, couldn't adjust. They printed money to cover the gap. Hyperinflation followed. Today, Venezuela is experiencing humanitarian crisis despite sitting on the world's largest oil reserves. It's Spain's silver paradox repeated exactly. Infinite resources, economic destruction. Saudi Arabia has recognized the danger. Despite being the world's largest oil exporter, Saudi Arabia is desperately trying to diversify through Vision 2030, investing oil wealth into other industries before the oil runs out or loses value. They're trying to avoid Spain's fate. Whether they succeed remains to be seen. Russia depends heavily on oil and gas exports. When oil prices are high, Russia seems powerful. When prices fall, the economy contracts. They've failed to develop competitive industries outside resources. The same trap Spain fell into. Nigeria, despite massive oil wealth, remains largely impoverished. Oil revenue flows to elites and foreign companies. Local industries can't compete. It's the Spanish model. Resources flow through the country, but don't build lasting wealth. Norway is the exception that proves the rule. They discovered North Sea oil and gas, but avoided Dutch disease by creating a sovereign wealth fund. Instead of spending oil revenue, they invested it globally. They maintained other industries. They treated oil as temporary wealth to be converted into permanent wealth. Norway studied history. They learned from Spain's mistake. Most nations don't. The pattern is clear. Resource wealth is a trap unless you convert it into productive capacity. Spain had a mountain of silver and went bankrupt. Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves and is in humanitarian crisis. More money doesn't make you richer if everyone has more money. Resource abundance without production equals inflation and dependency, not wealth. So what actually creates lasting wealth when you discover valuable resources? Spain teaches us what not to do. Norway teaches us what to do. First, invest resource wealth into productive capacity, not consumption. Use temporary resource wealth to build permanent industries. Develop technology, education, infrastructure that will create value after the resources are gone. Second, diversify the economy. Don't let one sector dominate. Maintain manufacturing, agriculture, services. When the resource eventually runs out or loses value, you need other sources of wealth. Third, save and invest surplus revenue. Don't spend everything during boom times. Create sovereign wealth funds that invest globally. Convert temporary resource wealth into permanent capital. Fourth, avoid inflation by not flooding the market. Produce sustainably. Don't destroy value by creating too much supply too quickly. Fifth, build human capital. Skills, education, innovation, these create lasting wealth. Resources are temporary. Human capability is renewable. Spain ignored all of these principles. They extracted silver, spent it immediately, produced nothing else, and went bankrupt despite infinite wealth. The nations that took Spain's silver, France, England, the Netherlands, invested it in industries and innovation. They became the new powers while Spain declined into irrelevance. Spain controlled half the world's silver production for over a century. They discovered a literal mountain of silver. The Spanish Empire stretched across every continent. The Spanish dollar was the world's first global currency. And they destroyed themselves, not through military defeat, not through plague or natural disaster, through economic mismanagement, through the belief that having more money automatically makes you richer, through the failure to understand that wealth comes from production, not from resources. Spain flooded Europe with silver. Prices rose proportionally. The silver that should have made them rich instead caused inflation. The wealth flowed through Spain but didn't stay. They stopped producing anything except silver. When you can buy everything with resources, why build industries? But industries create lasting wealth. Resources are temporary. They borrowed against future silver production. 4 times in 40 years, Spain declared bankruptcy despite controlling more precious metals than any nation in history. By 1700, Spain had fallen from global superpower to second-rate power. The mountain of silver kept producing, but the wealth went elsewhere, to the nations that built real economies while Spain just spent. The pattern is absolute. Resource wealth without productive capacity equals poverty. More money doesn't make you richer if everyone has more money. You cannot spend your way to prosperity. Spain proved it with silver. Venezuela is proving it with oil. Russia is proving it with gas. Every resource-dependent nation that fails to diversify follows the same path to decline. The paradox of wealth: having everything can destroy you faster than having nothing, because when you have nothing, you're forced to build. When you have everything, you stop building. And when the resources eventually run out, there's nothing left. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.